Today, we're talking about three important documents you should include in your express entry application to prove Canadian work experience. My name is
Yes.
Olena Weber, and I'm registered Canadian immigration consultant. And this is Cory Weber, also an RCIC.
Hello.
All right, so we're talking about important documents. So, what are these documents, Cory?
Yes, it's quite straightforward. It's quite, simple. It's three things. Number one, employment letter from your employer on their letterhead. Number two, pay stubs. And number three, your T4s from your Canadian employers. So that's it. In the simplest terms, those are the three documents. Of course, that we can get into some details about each of them. But yeah, basically that's what you want to provide.
Yes, and even though it is very basic, and yet we see so many people not including enough documents
Yeah.
or not knowing really which documents to include, or including documents that are not the correct format.
Exactly. Yeah. Been having, talks with people this week and they're like, should I include my bank statements and my this and my that for my Canadian employment? I said, whoa, you don't need to do that. Like, you don't have to include your bank statements showing your funds being in, like that's like going a bit too far. So, as long as you have like all your pay stubs, your T4s and your employment letter that's properly, done, then you should be fine in terms of, proof for your Canadian employment. So you don't have to go crazy and write all these letters and provide all this extra stuff. So that should be good enough in our experience to do for your Canadian side. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And we have submitted over 1,000 applications, and we literally never had a problem with this aspect. So
Yep.
that's why we really recommend just sticking with those three documents.
Exactly. Yeah.
All right, so let's start with talking about employment letter. So, what are the common mistakes that you see in terms of employment letter?
Yeah, so number one would be just not including all the information that is required, right? So as you can see now on the screen, you need, it all needs to be there, right? All the information. So first, it should be on, the company letterhead, obviously, and it should have contact information for the company, the address, telephone, etc., and all of the positions that you had while you were employed there. A lot of times, people will include the current position, even though they've been promoted like 2, 3, 4 times. That needs to be addressed as well. So um, again, like, and it should have all of the your details, like what your job title is, what your job duties are, if you are, how many hours a week you're working, your tenure there, how long have you worked there, and if you have any kind of benefits, your vacation, your hours per week, all this stuff needs to be included. So a common mistake that we see is people missing one, two, three, or four of these factors. And then there's a big question about, like, how many hours do you work a week? Are you full time? We don't know, right? So these kind of things, that missing these kind of important details in the employment letter could lead to problems in your application being processed, right? So it's very important that you follow the requirements. You include all of those details.
Yes, one thing that I see a lot is that people would include, or I guess employers would include just simply a statement that this worker has been working full time
Yeah,
from this day to this day. And then I would say to the applicant, I would say that, yeah, it doesn't have hours of work per week. You need to ask your employer to include hours of work per week. And
yeah,
then the person would always answer that, oh, it does. It
that's
has
full
a
time.
statement that it's a full time. And I'm like,
Yeah,
no, no, no. The words full time, it's not the same as statement 30 hours per week or 40 hours per
for
week.
you.
Who
Yeah.
knows what full time is? Right?
Exactly. Yeah.
Yes.
And yeah,
So
that's exactly right. Like, well, it's full time, but it's only 25 hours a week. But that's not full time, right? According to IRCC, 30 hours and above is full time. But maybe in someone's head they think, well, 28 hours is a lot, almost full time, but almost is not good enough in this case. Yeah.
yeah, and
Another,
obviously,
yeah, go
one
ahead.
of the most important things also to include is duties.
That's
So I
exactly what I was
recently
gonna say.
I recently was posting about this on Instagram, and people got like super confused for some reason, because I was saying that make sure that your duties in your employment letter are actually aligned with the knock number
Yeah,
that you are saying in your express entry profile that your
exactly.
experience falls under. And people were asking me like in direct messages and stuff saying that like, what do you mean, like, do I need to indicate knock number in a letter? And I'm like, no, 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 like, it's, of course, if it's Canadian work experience and you put knock number in the letter, it's a good thing, but
Yeah.
it's not what it is about. It's about your duties actually uh aligning, right? Like looking somewhat similar on,
Yeah.
what you see on a government website.
Yeah, exactly. So 2 points. Number one, of course, like people say, well, do I need to include my knock number in my Canadian employment? And in most cases, we say yes, because it's understood that most Canadian employers would understand what a knock number is, right?
Yeah.
And they understand like that this is a classification of your job and it would be important, like for immigration purposes. For your foreign employment, we would not expect to see a knock number on your foreign employment letter because it's assumed that they would not even know what those are, right? Like if you're from a different country that has, they don't have knock numbers, they don't know what these are. So I would say that not putting it on your foreign employment letter would make sense, but including it on your Canadian one does make sense. And then the other point about it would be with the job duties. You have to be careful to, as you're saying, like it should match, but it should not be copy pasted, right? So,
Yep.
and it can be difficult with certain professions. I understand, like, you think of like a person who's a carpenter and the job duties that they would have under their knock code. It's like, putting things together with wood and da 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 da. It might be difficult to paraphrase your job duties, but you need to. You can't just copy word for word from the knock code and put that into your letter because that won't be acceptable to
Well, I
IRCC.
find that a lot of HRs, they really like do that because
Yeah,
they're like doing this just kind of as a like during the lunch break, like they don't
yeah,
think it's that important, right? So they would just like
exactly.
go and like copy paste,
Yeah, which
and
is not the right thing to do. Yeah,
it's very visible. And we've had cases when immigration officer would say like, no, 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 like it's clearly
copy
copy
pasted.
paste, like we need employer to say it in their words. And we would
Exactly.
say like to employer, okay, you need to say it in the words. And employer is like, well, how do I say it? Like carpenter is a carpenter, like it's pretty
Yeah.
straightforward.
Exactly,
Yeah.
but you need to do the work, right? Like maybe the job is a bit different here or there, and the duties are a little bit. You can just move things around, and your verbiage can change, your words, and etc. So yeah, there's ways to make it, like
Yeah.
acceptable. Um, so that's just 2 points I would make on those duties.
Yeah, for sure. And then with regards to T4s, often we hear what to do if I don't have a T4.
Yeah, so I mean, the employer is responsible to give you the T4, right? Like you should get one every year, and that should be from your employer. They have, I believe, it's like an actual like
Yeah,
responsibility. They must give it to you. It's not a maybe they will, maybe they won't. They have to give it to you for
yeah,
tax reasons, etc. Right? So, go to your employer. Tell them they have to give it to you if they're not giving it to you, or if you like. The alternative, if you don't know if you had it or if you don't, you can log into uh, your CRA account, your government run CRA account, and you should be able to find your T4 there as well. So, but first place would be to go to the employer and say, "Hey, give me my T4." They have a responsibility to keep that information on file for you and give that to you every year. So there's no really way around it for them.
yeah, for sure. And then let's talk about the pay stubs. So one question we hear literally every single day is that really all the pay stubs? That's
Yeah.
so many.
I know. I know. And yeah, I get it. It's a bunch of work. You got to compile all these pay stubs. Can't I just provide like my two most recent ones and that's it? No, provide them all because we want to make sure that they see like your full record of employment there, that they see how long you've been working and it's been one full year continuous, and and all your hours are there and your job titles there. All this important information that are included on your pay stubs. And so yes, we would like to see all of them. If you're missing one or two, I lost this one, I can't find that one. That would probably be fine. Like I wouldn't, stress too much if you're missing one or so. But yeah, like get yourself the Adobe file and start combining pay stubs. And I understand it's not necessarily easy, combining files, and sometimes it's like you're limited to how much megabytes you can actually upload into your application. So it can be a piece of work to get. compile all these things together. But it's very important, right, to put that employment file together correctly. That's what the government expects: is employment letter, and then T4s, and then all those pay stubs. Give yourself the best chance to have a successful, application, and don't mess around with important documents that the government expects to have.
Yes. In some situations, also just to add to that, that we add notice of assessment if the client, for whatever reason, cannot like get the pay stub. So whatever happens, like as
Yeah.
an additional document instead of either T4 or pay stubs, sometimes we also ask them to put notice of assessment. So that's fine as well. And then a very important note here is that we have reports from, consultations and just people who are going through immigration process right now that IRCC started actually calling the employers. So one thing about going back to employment letter is that make sure that contact details are there and contact details of the person who signed the letter
Yeah.
are there, and that your employer actually knows that IRCC may call them
Yeah.
and may ask questions, and it just may happen because that's what we have been seeing more and more right now.
Yeah. And just, I think we forgot to mention, it should be obviously on the company letterhead as well, right? It, like the employment letter, it can't be something you drafted and then your employer just signs the Word document. No, that actually has to be on company letterhead. That's another requirement. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Well, I think we covered it all. If you guys have any questions, put them in comments, please. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel. And thank you so much for watching. See you next time.